Hi, welcome to Nearpod, the next level. My name is Lisa Graf, and I teach 8th grade science at Merrill Middle School as well as for E-Academy. I completely believe that Nearpod is one of the best tools to increase student engagement in your class, whether you have students in person or virtual. It seamlessly integrates the interactive, formative, and summative assessments right into your slide deck. It allows students to anonymously participate in lessons, so you receive much more genuine and authentic input from students. And the best part for me is that it integrates right into Canvas, so I can see student participation and learning right in my speed grader. So here's some data that I gathered. The first 5 weeks of virtual learning for this school year, I had about 60% of my 110-ish students attending meets on a regular basis, but only 40% of those students were completing the work that was associated with the meets. 2 weeks after using Nearpod, I was tracking 92% participation from students that were attending meets. And 4 weeks in, I was hitting 100% student engagement for the students who were attending meets. And then one complete unit, which was 12 lessons, Nearpod lessons, I had 97% of students who attended the meets regularly, did 100% of the work. And then out of those students, they scored at or above an 89% on the final summative assessment for the unit, which I thought was fantastic. So my specific feedback about Nearpod planning, Nearpod makes planning so much easier and a more efficient use of your time. It allows so much flexibility to differentiate on the fly with teaching. So you can have students speaking, chatting, you can have them in person too doing this. It allows interaction on a much higher level, and you can meet the needs of all different kinds of learners. The feedback that you get is immediate. That is such a great feature. When we were virtual, after a live meet, it would take me 5 minutes to give each and every one of my students from that hour some authentic feedback. So whether that was a copy paste of like, hey, we missed you on our meet, make sure you make it on this time, this date, and please try to get this done, reach out with any questions. And then you can scroll through students' interactions that they had with the lesson and leave them comments, like things that you recognize that they did really well, or spots where you think, hey, let's get together and have a one-on-one time where we can chat and make sure they really understand a concept that they might have missed. The assessments that you can do make this all the things that you do in a classroom where you can see their facial expressions and read their body language. Nearpod allows you to do that in a virtual world, so it was an amazing tool when we were virtual. I anticipate when we have students in person that using this is going to also be a really great tool. So Nearpod allows for accommodations for all students. So I talked with some of our cross-cat teachers here at Merrill Middle School to get their input on how Nearpod's being used to best meet their students' needs. And it's something that is well received by both students and teachers. Here are basic accommodations that a lot of IEPs have. So the common accommodations of clarified, simplified directions. You can verbally record yourself talking through the directions and insert that into a slide using the video tool. You can simplify your wording on each slide and add pictures. The text read aloud is really great with Nearpod. There's an immersive reader that's already built in, so there's no need for students to have to run an additional extension to do that. There's also a notes feature in Nearpod that teachers could use, could direct students like, hey, on slide number 4, I need you to write this down. Or you could actually provide students with those bare bones for those slides specifically. And extended time, as a student-paced Nearpod lesson, students can take as long as they need to. They can always come back. They can submit little pieces as they go, but they can always restart to pick up where they left off and add some more thinking to their submissions that they already have. So some of the tools that Nearpod allows you to use on your slides, video questions, so you can stop it at various points, polls to quickly judge students' understanding, open-ended questions, which are anonymous, matching. You can do 3D tours. You can do a drawing tool. This is helpful for like a science or a math where you need students to fill in data. You could take a picture, upload that, and all the students get that same picture, and then they could draw in the data that they gather from completing a lab of some sort. So I think this is what really makes Nearpod a successful tool. So the work path without Nearpod, and this is speaking for when we were virtual. So students were going into my Canvas, they'd open a slide deck which would then, for science, take them to amplify resources. And then they would have to go back to Canvas and then open their meet. So we usually had 3 or 4 windows sometimes if we were doing a simulation, 5, 6 windows at a time. So it's a lot of different steps. I could see why only 40% of those students who were attending my meets were able to track along all these different steps and keep up with all the different things I had going. When I used Nearpod, all students needed to have was their Canvas open and then the meet open. So everything flowed seamlessly through Canvas. We all had the same slide deck that they could look at, and using it as a student pace, they could go back to that. So I want to take you into Canvas to show you what this actually looks like from a student view and as my own view as the teacher. So all these lessons for human impact unit used Nearpod. So this 2.0 is our halfway point. Anything that you edit in the Canvas assignment setting, this is always going to be above your Nearpod. So here's where your notes feature is. You click this little button and you can send it by email, save it to your Drive or OneDrive. I always had students save it to their Google Drive, and at the end of the lesson, I would have them go into their Google Drive to organize it, because unfortunately it doesn't automatically dump it into a Nearpod folder. You have to move it. So I have students find it in their recent, and then I have them move it right into like human impact unit folder, so it's organized for them. So you can set that up with a bare bones or anything that you want to add to that if you need to add some accommodations. So you can this is set up as a student paced, so you can join the lesson whenever you would like. We have a few title slides. I always started and ended with the learning goals so students knew what we were focused on. A warm-up open-ended question here. So what's going to happen to the level of water in the bucket if I try to just hit next? Unfortunately, it lets me go right to the next slide because I've already gone through the slide deck, but normally it would not let a student continue until they answered this question. So I had just hit a few things there, and then you can go next. So not all your slides need to be interactive. To engage the immersive reader, you would click on this button here and it would read the things on the slide for you. We did a simulation here. So I had them doing a poll to record their results that they found. This has 4 different questions. You have to answer them. And it let me skip through it because I've already gone through this lesson. So a video, the cool thing about the video is I'm going to play it. It picks up where I was.
And the energy.
Okay. So that let me skip just because I've already watched it through one time. But it would not let students skip through it. And you can insert questions along the way for that video or any video. Just trying to zip through this lesson here. 3 different challenges. Here's a quiz with 4 questions. So here's what a student would get if they tried to just zip right through this. Wait, oops, looks like you haven't answered. Got it. So you have to go back. I'm just going to click through and put some random answers so I can continue on here. It tells you your score right away. It looks like my guessing was not terrible. So one of those was correct out of the 4. And if you keep it student paced, they can go back and they can make corrections at any time. So we're going to keep on moving here. So open-ended question. So this is the student's kind of like halfway point, and it's their chance to show me their understanding. So I gave them the claim that the question, and then I gave them 3 claims, and they had to pick one of those and use various pieces of evidence. And yep, it's going to make me type something here. So I have to try to type something, hit submit, and then I have the learning goals, and that's what it looks like from my point of view, from a student point of view. If you open up your speed grader, you get this really cool feedback PDF. So it tells you how long the student interacted with the material. So that's how much time they were actually working in the slide deck, not necessarily how much time it took them to get through the 19 slides. It gives you the data for the student and then the overall class. So quizzes, you can see their answer. It automatically scores this. I didn't have to do anything with the scoring. The polls, I can see what they answered here. The open-ended question, this is the student's answer I guess it highlighted over there. This student's answer is here on the right, which was an outstanding answer. I could score it. And if I didn't have any questions built into that video, but if I had questions built in, it would take me to this video, and I would open the video through this, and I could see their answers along the way. So you can score this via the rubric, and then you can hit save or enter the points depending on what you are. So that's what it looks like from my point of view as a student. I just want to show you what they see here. It's essentially the same thing when it's student-paced. So they're going to see the same lesson. Not much is different for them this way. So I'm going to leave the student view there. Okay, I'm going to walk you through how you take a slide deck and you're saving it into Nearpod, and then you're uploading your Nearpod lesson into your Canvas. So here is my lesson that I'm going to save. This has already been saved in Nearpod. I can check and make sure. Yep, it's in here. It's saved. So then I go to my Canvas, and wherever I want to add it, which I'm going to add it to my ocean, atmosphere, and climate, I'm going to hit the plus sign here. As an assignment, a new assignment, and I'm going to call this OAC 1.1, add item. So because this is going to be an external tool, you need to edit the rubric first. So add your rubric, ocean, atmosphere, climate rubric. I'm just going to do a generic one. Let's see, find the outcome. So weather and climate, I'm going to import that. Let's see, create the rubric. 4 points. So now I need to go to edit. Just know that anything that you type in this box here is going to appear above every single Nearpod slide that you're showing. So make sure it's something that you really need to put in there. Otherwise, feel free to leave it blank. This is going to be a 4-point LCS score. And I want to make sure I assign all this information first. Okay, so when all that is set up, you're going to go to your submission type, and you're going to click External Tool. You'll need to find the one that you're looking for. So arrow down, select Nearpod. This is going to take you to your Nearpod, and you're going to find all your lessons here. So I like to organize mine. So here's the lesson that I want to do. It's at this point where I need to decide, is it going to be live participation or student-paced? Because we're hybrid and I have students on quarantine, I also want my students to have access to this slide deck as it acts as their textbook for the most part. So I always opt for student-paced. So once you hit that, and then you hit select, and it should be there. And then you can hit save. And it's not going to look like you have a rubric. Know that you do have a rubric still. When you get students' work turned in, you'll see the rubric that pops up. So here's your lesson. You can arrow through this. Also know one important thing. If I need to go back and I need to make any edits whatsoever on here, even if it's just a slide edit, not necessarily a tool in Nearpod, I need to make sure that I am going back and saving those edits into the Nearpod. And then you need to redo all those steps I just walked you through, because once you change something in the slide deck, it kind of messes up the link between your Nearpod and your Canvas. So you need to just go back to this assignment. You can edit the assignment settings and then redo it starting with the external tool. So looking at student-paced versus teacher-led Nearpods, just want to give you a full picture of what both of those look like. So student-paced, students can access that slide deck anytime and complete activities independently. It still will give students and teachers the immediate feedback. Best practice for this would be when students are unable to attend meets or hybrid at home learning or they're virtual. You can still use it during live meets, you just do not have the live view of students' work. So if you opt to do a teacher-led live participation, students access that slide deck using a code, and then the teacher controls the slide deck advancing as well as going backwards. So students have no power to go back or skip ahead. Teachers can see the student submissions live. So as they're filling in like an open-ended question, you can see what they're saying and you can opt to share some of those. Know that when you share that, it's not being shared anonymously though, that everybody will be stopped and that one student submission will be highlighted on the screen. Students also cannot revisit the slide deck once it's completed. So some positives and negatives from both of these. So positives first, teacher-led. You can watch and respond to student submissions in live time. You can share out student examples. A positive with student-paced is that they can access at any time, not just during your meets or during your class time. They can go back and look at that content at any point in time. And the data is still submitted into SpeedGrader for super quick and easy assessing. So negatives, the biggest negative to teacher-led Nearpods is logistically you have to make 2 copies of each lesson for each hour you teach it. So one you're going to use live with whoever is in your classroom or make the meet. And then the other copy would be for student-paced for those not at the meet. So for me, I teach 5 sections of science, so I would have to have 10 copies of each lesson. And then in Canvas, I would have to make sure I'm assigning the student-led version to the students who didn't attend the live session. So for me personally, I've always opted to do the student-paced because I have so many students not making the meets but still doing the work, and I felt this gave them equal access to it. Also for science, I use this as my kind of textbook. Like all my content is right in that slide deck. So using it as a teacher-led, students cannot go back to the slide deck at all. So using it as a student-paced, they can always have access to that. Negatives for student-paced is that the teacher doesn't have live access to the student submissions. So sometimes I would try to move a little too quick, and you know how not many of my 8th graders were real quick to tell me, hey, Mrs. Graf, slow down a little bit, I need more time. So it's tough because you can't judge how students are interacting right at that time. And then I have to act as a student in order to advance the slides. So again, it's really hard to tell when students are done thinking or have their input set into the Nearpod. So which should I use? At what time is which one better? When you upload your assignment in Canvas, you have to pick if you want it teacher-led live participation or student-paced. So you have to keep that in mind with every lesson. So if you were opting to do teacher-led live participation, maybe you're in person, that individual lesson might be just presented a single time and you don't have to give students access to go back to that content. You just would like to gather the data. So just off the top of my head, warm-ups or exit slip kind of things would be useful in this format. Student-paced, if you teach multiple sections of the same content, you can use the same lesson for each hour if it's student-paced. And then if it's something that a student should have access to outside of when you're delivering it, definitely opt for a student-paced lesson. A few tips and tricks before you get started that I wish I would have known. When you're doing a Nearpod, you can only do 1 feature per page. You can change the background of that page if you want through slide decks, but you cannot add more than 1 Nearpod feature per page. You also can't have any text or anything like that on that page because the Nearpod kind of takes over that page. Conversation boards are an excellent tool to use, but this shows up as a 0 participation SpeedGrader. You have to actually go and open the class board, and then you'll have to locate the student's contribution if that's something you're scoring. Oftentimes I just use conversation boards to share thinking, not necessarily as something that's graded anyways, but if you want to track that so you can see students' learning progress, you're going to have to go back to the conversation board. Time is ticking. So science slide decks of 18 to 24 slides typically took me 30 to 45 minutes to teach through virtually. Using Nearpod increases your engagement, but make sure you're allowing extra time for students to be engaged with the material. More slides, less work. When I started, I crammed an entire science lesson into 20 slides. It took 45 minutes. Now, after doing this for so many lessons and also getting some student input, 40 to 50 slides sounds crazy, but you only have a few things on each slide. So it still takes about the same amount of time. It's just easier to understand and go through. Differentiating. One major thing to keep in mind is that Nearpod isn't going to replace our best practices for instructional strategies. That's just not going to happen. It's just a tool that's going to help you differentiate and leverage all those strategies that you know to best meet the needs of each single student. The biggest thing is that it makes an easier work path for you. So try to keep it, if you're doing a Nearpod lesson, build your whole lesson in that slide deck. The whole lesson doesn't have to have a Nearpod feature on every single slide, but if you have the whole lesson right there in that slide deck, it's such an easier work path for students to go in there, plug in all their information, interact with the material, hit submit, and it is done. So here are some extra resources. This slide deck should be linked for you that you can go check out. The integration guide, teacher resources. Nearpod has some great tools. They also have a chat feature that you can always engage with. People are really quick to respond to that, 1 to 5 minutes usually. And if they can't help you, they always have found a way to help me. I am excited for all of your student engagements to skyrocket because this makes it super easy for students to be engaged with the lesson 100% of the time. Again, it's Lisa Graf, 8th grade science, Merrill Middle School. If this is something you want to explore more or see how it could best meet your needs in your classroom, please reach out. I'm happy to help you. This has been an amazing tool that has increased student engagement in my classroom by so much. I strongly believe in this tool. It is excellent on every level. Please send me an email or a message, a Hangout message or something. I'm happy to help with anything you need. Thanks.